Hello and welcome to the Coaching Podcast, Coaching for Success in Sport and Business. Your host is Emma Doyle, the energy and high performance under pressure coach who is a world leader in unleashing human potential. Buckle up for this high octane session. Let them have it, coach.
G'day everybody and welcome to the Coaching Podcast. Today I am interviewing Toby Jenkins, who, look, he's just a sensational bloke. I'll stop there. Welcome to the show, Toby.
Thanks, Em. No, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I say a sensational bloke because I've only met him once, but the conversation we had, I felt like I could have chatted to him for hours. And he reminds me of one of my best mates. Shout out to Chris Anstey, just thinking outside of the square and our first conversation. But for those of you who don't know Toby, he's an executive coach and speaker, father Olympian. Water polo was his sport of choice, an award-winning entrepreneur and author. His purpose is to change the world's relationship with suffering. Oh, my goodness. I can't wait to delve into that, as well as psychological flexibility, so much more. He's got a diverse group of clients. So I'm going to jump straight into our patent break question. And as he's a Queenslander, of course, the AFL Grand Final was on recently. So I want to know if you were a footballer, what position would you have played on the field?
Good question. I never played AFL. So I think in PE, and I remember actually the one experience that I had in PE was that, for those of you who know AFL, when you go to kick a goal, you know, you have to kick it straight through the two posts, obviously in the middle. But I thought I was pretty helpful, so I jumped up and touched the ball in, and which automatically made it behind. So I don't know that I would have made much of an AFL player at all, Em, to be honest.
Maybe the goalie. Shout out to all those umpires that put up with a lot of stuff. Let's talk about your coach early on growing up. Talk me through those early days and how did you discover water polo, and perhaps what was your first memory of a coach?
Yeah, I discovered water polo through my sisters. So I'm one of 5 kids. I have 2 older sisters, a younger brother and a younger sister. Shout out to them. My 2 older sisters, we were all swimmers, and my 2 older sisters both tried water polo and loved it at high school. And I thought, oh, well, I'll give it a shot too. And yeah, fell in love with it. Swimming, the best parts of being in a pool and swimming, I love the water, surfing, all sorts of stuff. A ball sport and then a team sport as well. And I was a happy guy. The first coach I had for water polo too he was amazing. His name was Peter Love, who's a British national team player and a great player and one of the most enthusiastic water polo people you'll ever meet. So it was great. He really lit the fire in terms of the water polo and was a great coach, and it was all just about having fun. But he was so enthusiastic and energetic and positive around it. So that was my first exposure to the game, and he really set a tone for the rest of it. And he was an incredible player and role model of his own. So learned a lot from him.
Well, I love just picking up on, first of all, when I interviewed over 500 coaches for my book, passion was number one, and feeling the energy that comes with passion, with joy, with absolutely loving your sport. Because I have to say, I hated swimming lessons growing up. I just watching that black line at the bottom of the pool. But, you know, you kind of hit the triple whammy with me. I mean, I love ball sports. I love being a part of a team. And I really didn't discover that until I came to the US and played college tennis. So, yeah, I wonder if I probably would have enjoyed water polo more than my swimming lessons and my awful swimming coaches. Yeah. So, all right. So talk to me about, let's keep going down the path of you now, you know, being at the Olympics and the mental toughness that comes with being an Olympian, the expectation of the country, and then the role that the coach plays within that. So just go wherever you want with that, with your experience and background.
Look, I think I first set the goal to play for Australia when I applied for the Queensland Academy of Sport here in Brisbane.
You were 15 or
And
something, weren't you? You were young.
14, yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
I think it was my second year of playing water polo, and I was applying to be a part of a winter program because I really wanted to keep playing because I loved it. And I put down I want to play for Australia. I didn't really know what that meant, had no idea. And yeah, it got me a Guernsey into that program, which was awesome. And then Sydney was announced when I was perhaps 15 or 16. And then all of a sudden, and we actually had the awesome foursome who are Olympic gold medalist rowers here in Australia who came and showed up at the school. And I remember really clearly just being inspired by their sort of discussion around the Olympics. Sydney was on the table as well. And suddenly that felt more real or felt possible. And so I just thought, oh, well, why not? Why not? Like have a go. And actually one of the guys, Mike McKay, his name was, I think one of the teachers asked him, did you have any superstitions? Did you have any inspiration or what have you? And he said he had on the bottom of his boat, and I still remember this, he'd written on the boat, it was who, now, and gold. If not me, who? If not now, when? And gold, as in gold medal. And it actually still gives me goosebumps because I really sort of reflected on that. And for some reason, that just struck a chord for me. And I have loved that. And sort of thought about that a lot because he was also he said, look, I moved towards not having any superstitions because I didn't want to rely on anything else outside of me as a precondition to my performance. Well, that's how I frame it now. I don't know how he actually said it, but for me, that was something that I really took through as well, was that I wanted to be able to perform without a reliance on a particular set of external events happening in order for me to perform. And yeah, it was just one of those moments, I guess, that stuck with me. And I've probably continued around that. And actually, I ended up at the Australian Institute of Sport in the lead up to Sydney, which was where the national team was training. And I ended up missing out on Sydney. But I remember doing some psych testing down there, and I came back like off the charts on control. I was like super, super high on control. And I thought, that's not me. I'm not a controlling person. And it just didn't make sense. But now in hindsight, I think that that idea of being in control of my destiny and in control of as much as I possibly could actually makes a huge amount of sense. And so I've come to terms with the fact that perhaps I am a control freak, and in fact, maybe many other athletes are too, in terms of trying to control as much as you can or letting go of what you can't, which also I think, from a mindset standpoint or where I've developed in my understanding, and I really love Stoic philosophy as well, which is this idea of, we have such little control of the world around us. And as I've learned more and more, we have such little control of the world inside us as well. The internals, the thoughts, the feelings, sensations. And so the only point of control really is the choices we make. And so if we can't control our reaction, how do we choose our response? And that is, probably my 3-word summary of Stoicism is choice of response, given that, Stoic philosophy would say that we're at the will and whimsy of Mistress Fortune. So what will we do? How will we respond here? And I think that ties in beautifully too with the psychological flexibility and some of the ACT framework that I tend to coach to now. Yeah, which is all, I guess the core visual for that is, or my shift, I guess, is that as an Olympian, I really felt like it was harder, tougher, stronger. Like I needed to be harder and tougher and stronger. Whereas now I've recognized that it's much more around, how do we help people rather than become brick walls? How do we help them become trampolines? And I see that as a key role of me as a coach, is how do I help people sort of, you hit a brick wall hard enough with a sledgehammer, what happens? It breaks. If you hit a trampoline with a sledgehammer, we absorb the hit and bounce back, absorb and bounce back, and absorb and bounce back. And to me, that's the core, certainly shift in terms of my perspective of performance mindset, particularly in where I am now versus what I felt I needed to be as an Olympian. I mean, it's such an intense experience, I guess, the Olympics themselves as well. And so, how willing are we to open up to the suffering that is inevitably a part of what we all experience? And I do love sort of the spiritual, traditional, religious, philosophical traditions that we all have as humans, because I think all of them are ways that we've developed in order to work with, reality or the human condition. And for me, that means how do we open up to these experiences? How do we acknowledge that that is a part of life and suffering? Buddha said life is suffering. I tend to agree. And so how do we open up to that and acknowledge that and still experience the joy or still have the aspirations and the hopes and the dreams, but then how do we sit with the discomfort, the doubts, the fears, the frustrations, all at the same time?
So I love what you said, and I agree, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. What if a coach is listening to this and says, you know what, I've been a coach for a while now, and harder, tougher, stronger. I've had a lot of success as a coach. And, I think that I have to be this way with my players to bring out the best in them. So I'm just playing, I'm being a bit cheeky, but what would you say to that coach listening?
My initial response would be harder, tougher, stronger is one tool in the toolkit. And I think this is part of my shift, is that the harder, tougher, stronger, the goal setting, sitting with discomfort, all that kind of stuff, none of that goes out the door with this shift from my standpoint. A lot of that still applies. And in fact, the best of it still applies. The opportunity then, though, is to recognize that to deeply care means that we must experience that, some degree of suffering. The more we care, the more likely it is to show up, in fact. It's why I say, the day I arrived in the Olympic Village, I thought I had a stomach infection. The day I left, it stopped, a physiological response to how important this thing was to me. If someone had said, hey, Toby, we've got the goal, we know what we're doing as a team, but it's okay to have that experience. So open up, it's normal, in fact, and a really typical response to pressure situations. It's holding these two things in your mind at the same time and recognizing that you still have a choice in these settings. It's not the absence of one, but the presence of both.
I love that.
That would be, yeah.
And also psychological flexibility. I mean, I'd love to just get a definition from you. It's not a term that people use. I mean, they tend to use, say, even resiliency is more of a word that we hear rather than psychological flexibility. But one of the reasons that I love that, the reason you're into it is the fact that it is deeply rooted in the neuroscience of what we are seeing in today's world and how to coach, whether it be in the workplace or on the sporting field. Yeah, just unpack it further so that we're not just using terms that people really don't understand what we're talking about. Yeah,
so psychological flexibility, really, at its most basic, I think, is the ability to shift your attention. So how do we shift our attention? So whether that's in a setting of stress and pressure, or whether it's really our ability to move our attention from our internal experience to what matters now, and how do we then act on that? And our ability to expand our context or zoom in on our context, to hold ourselves, our own perspective, others' perspective, the shared perspective. So how do we consolidate that, and how do we shift our attention to what matters right now, given that the context is forever shifting around us? And so we know that, again, we don't control much of the world. If we don't control much of our thoughts and feelings and sensations, then how do we shift our attention back to the present, to recognize the context, to understand what truly matters here, and then go again? And the framework then that underpins this is ACT. So acceptance and commitment therapy, if you're a therapist, training, if you're a coach like me. What that requires is, so the three pillars are to open up and to be present and to do what matters. So open up is not necessarily about opening up to others, but being willing to experience discomfort in service of the things that we care about. Be present is very much the mindfulness frame of awareness of the present moment. How do we come back to the present to recognize not so much that we necessarily feel better, but to recognize that we still have a choice, and then do what matters, to understand what matters in a given context, and then do that thing. And the thing that I find really interesting is it comes from a background of contextual behavioralism, which means that behavior and performance behavior is contextual. So in one moment, it might be to speak up. In the next moment, it might be to listen. And both of those could be the performance behavior. And my definition of performance behavior tends to be the one that feels less comfortable. And so often, and this is why I have moved to a framing of towards and away, and ACT talks a lot about towards and away framing rather than positive and negative. And one of the things I love about that is that towards is about moving towards our values, our purpose, our goals, who's important, what's important, all the great stuff. Away is very much about moving away from those things. And both of those experiences, in a towards move, there is a short-term pain, which is nearly always we need to sit with the discomfort of what we're going through in order to make the towards move, which is a better frame in my mind than a positive behavior, because a positive behavior may not feel good to start with. And in fact, it's the discomfort that stops us from making, positive behavior or towards behavior. It's the discomfort of getting out of bed, because it's cold to go for the run that we all know that we need to make, versus the away behavior is we hit snooze because it's comfortable in bed. And it's actually logical for us to accept to prefer the comfort rather than to take on the discomfort. And because it made sense back when we were living in caves to avoid the discomfort and avoid the pain because it was a threat to us, right? But the opportunity then I see in terms of this towards framing too, and why I love psychological flexibility and ACT, is that it allows space for both of those experiences. It acknowledges both of those experiences, but helps us to connect to both the long-term benefit of a towards move and the long-term cost of an away move. Because inherently, if we keep hitting snooze on the alarm, there's a long-term cost, even though there's a short-term benefit. But if we get up and accept the cold and put on the jog and the first kilometre is uncomfortable, then there's the long-term benefit of being able to make, health and energy and all, what we all know. But so that's the frame, I guess, to sort of unpack psychological flexibility is how do we shift our attention from, particularly, I think, that the short-term or the discomfort, how do we accept the discomfort and shift it around to focus on what truly matters and reconnect to the long game here and play the longer game?
Well, so much in what you just said. I tell you, I've never come back from a run and gone, gee, that really sucked. When I finish the run.
Yes. Yeah.
When I finish the run, I feel amazing.
Yes.
And the weather's just starting to shift here in Colorado. So the mornings are very crisp right now, which is also very beautiful. The leaves are changing and which is fabulous. All right. So a lot of what you just said there talks about also alignment versus a coach who's trying to be balanced all the time.
The more I explore this concept of balance versus alignment, I move towards alignment. Balance feels like trade-offs, whereas alignment feels like compounding. And that example of the run is a really classic one, and one I see a lot in my coaching practices. How do we recognize that the run is in service of us being a better, for me, a better father, a better husband, better coach, better colleague, and that if we can pull these things into alignment, then all of them serve one another. So the more I practice being a coach, I'm hoping that pays off as a parent with my girls. The more, and in my social setting, the more I learn, the more I find better questions to ask myself and others. And so one of the things I love is trying to see where can the alignment happen? How can I help people recognize that all of these things are actually in service of a much longer game if you are willing to play the longer game. If you're not, then that's a really tricky place. And I guess a lot of people find themselves in that spot where they're playing shorter term games, and the trade-offs the cost gets paid sooner or later. The price is paid, but that's where I see alignment versus balance. And because the world is changing so much around us, we can't really control those trade-offs. But if we can see them, and also if we can communicate that alignment, that's something I talk to clients about a lot, because it's the ongoing alignment conversations with the key people in our lives. I am doing this because of this, because this is how this will be of service to all of us. And if you can be clear on where you're going, then, and clear on some of those, purpose, values, goals, all that kind of thing, then you can have alignment becomes much easier to say, hey, this is where I thought we were headed. Is this where we're headed? Yes or no? Okay, cool. Well, here's how I'm thinking about that. And then that ongoing conversation, because the work of those conversations is never done either. And I've noticed, particularly this year, one of the things a key lesson perhaps from this year is that the most important work is never done. They are a set of practices, whether that's relationships, health, work, coaching, meditation. I mean, you name it. The most important things are never done. Living our values, driving towards a sense of purpose and impact and contribution in the world. They're never any practices. And if you actually start, I actually changed my model this year and decided I would go to practice setting rather than goal setting this year. And so what are my practices that I want for the rest of my life? And coaching was one of them. And then how do I find coaches to help me do that? And so, have a coaching coach. I have a health and fitness coach. I have a nutrition person who's helping me. I have, financial coach. I've actually sort of gone a bit bonkers on coaching this year, but I also feel like it's doubling down on the compounding effect of these small things that I know are extremely important and whose practices will never finish.
Yeah. Well, as coaches, I think it's important that we have a coach ourselves. Otherwise, sort of saying, yeah, come to me as your coach, but I don't have a coach. I mean, I totally agree with that. I have different coaches for different areas of my life. And also it's one of the reasons why in my book, we didn't call them chapters, we call them practices. It's you can't say empathy. Yeah, I do that really well. Tick. Empathy's a practice and a reflection. So I love all that. Yes. And of course, shout out to a previous episode if you haven't seen it, Second Set of Eyes. That was a really great episode and a great reminder again on practice and reflection and this whole alignment. So Lotus, I want to throw a topic that has been coming up recently, and it does relate to a lot of what we're saying, but it's a bit, old school. I know you've always got a different lens cap through which you see the world, Toby. I want to know time management. I mean, even just those two words make me feel a bit sick, right? I mean, it's a construct. And even when I was in Kenya recently, let me tell you that time doesn't really exist there. Like their definition of time, let's just say it's like it's not even a thing, right? Which I found really challenging when I was running the coach education workshop, but when I was on safari, I thought it was fabulous. Yes. So this has been coming up a lot as it relates to, you talk about the trampoline effect, like bouncing back, having to be resilient, leaders. It does point to burnout, right? This is kind of where I'm going with it, but it keeps coming up, this whole concept of how we manage time. What are your thoughts?
My preference is to manage priorities and then leave the diary specifically for time blocked. So at a micro level, diary for me is time blocked, like there's an event that has to happen at a given time. So recording of this podcast is happening at 7:00 my time in Brisbane. That goes in my diary. Then it's about priority management. And for me, I tend to think about priority management using an agile frame, or I use agile frameworks. So essentially, again, the idea that the world is forever changing, our ability to enshrine a sense of prioritization each week, reflection each week, to recognize that the world has changed and what have I learned and what am I going to do differently next week and how do we continue to refine. So that's on the time management and prioritization piece as two separate things. So the tasks I need to do are different to my time. So two separate streams. I mean, the greatest time hack for me is role modeling as well. So I was asked once, what's your favorite productivity time management tip? And I said, well, I just think find someone who's already done it and ask them, that'll save you decades rather than trying to, figure out how you save 5 minutes a day or 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there. So I don't know. And that's kind of splitting your question into three different parts, but that's kind of how I think about time. But it is, and the other thing I do think a lot about time from the standpoint of it is a non-renewable resource. It's extremely precious. And therefore, how do I spend it? Who do I spend it with? And when I think about my own diary and also those people that I coach, I also think about, I guess it's the classic big rocks first in your jar, but you tell me what your priorities are or who is most important to you and what your priorities are in life, and then show me your diary. It's the fastest audit you can do and I mean, and you look at those two things sometimes and no wonder people are burning out because your diary does not reflect what you say is most important to you. And if that is the case, then, your energy lies in the things that are most important to you and internally. And so if you can manage your time to reflect what you care about, then, it doesn't mean that your diary gets any less full, but you're doing more of what you care about and therefore inherently energizing and intrinsically motivating. And again, from that alignment standpoint, your ability to manage your own energy for the long game and sustainably means that you will be more productive. So sure, the gym feels like you're missing out on emails and calls right now, but the truth is if you don't go to the gym for long enough, you won't even be around to do emails and calls. So, and you that sort of misperception that our productivity in the afternoon is better because we just stayed put at the desk and sat for another 5 hours. Whereas if we moved for one and then came back for 4, those 4 are substantially more productive, more focused, triage better, executed better, everyone wins. And so that comes back to that alignment piece as well.
Yeah. And also, I guess what you're talking about really feeds nicely into choice versus sacrifice, the other thing that you love to talk about. Because I mean, everything I'm hearing is, you get the alignment, the choices we make, how we respond to certain situations is so important versus thinking that our life, we're balancing and we're sacrificing. And, I think that's what the through line for me so far with this chat. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Sacrifice is a bit of a bugbear of mine because particularly from an athlete background, and you've probably seen it too, the idea that, me as an athlete was sacrificing things. When I think about the resources I had at my disposal, the kind of near narcissistic existence that I lived in terms of pursuing my dream and the amount of people that supported me to be able to do that, the instant we can sacrifice is something that happens to us. Choice is something that we can control or that we get to choose. And the sooner we can shift from sacrifice to choice to recognize that I'm choosing here, I think is a really important perspective shift. The other thing to recognize here is that choice does not mean an absence of loss. So it doesn't mean that there isn't a sense of missing out, back as an athlete, whether that was, feeling like I was missing out on social engagements or what have you, but to recognize that it was a choice that I was pursuing this dream and that a lot of people were supporting me to do that. And I definitely felt like I was sacrificing at times. So it's not like I held that perspective all the time. But yeah, if we can come back to the choice each time and recognize that, for most of us, we are so fortunate, in fact, that we get to have these choices. No one is holding a gun to our heads, right? Whereas some people, that is happening to them. So, expanding our perspective and recognizing that we are choosing to be here also gives us agency over what we choose to do next.
Mm.
And then we can begin to make the change that we feel we want to see. And yeah, and again, maybe that's just coming back to that intrinsic internal locus of control as well.
Yep.
That we do have a choice, and therefore I can make a change. And in fact, what's interesting, even back to that time concept, I often get in my workshops and coaching and stuff, I get people to calculate the number of days they have left to live in terms of reminding them around the finiteness of time, but also the days they've been alive, to recognize that, we've all made lots of iterations of change. And so if we can come back to the fact that, today, or this choice or this decision or this experiment that I'm going to run today is literally just that. And we've done it all before. It's just that this one, it might feel particularly sticky, but we've done it before. We can do it again. We did it innately as kids all the time. We sit at the bottom of learning curves and try to make change.
Yeah. That beginner's mindset, isn't it? When you're taking on something. I like looking back. I've always done, this is how many years I have left, but I haven't done the other way. So I like that. Thank you for sharing that practical tool. So we're going to ask you our guiding question. And I was wondering, maybe could you give us a practical tool related to your answer, either one of your three options. So in 1 to a maximum of 3 words, what do you think makes a great coach? And what practical tool could you sort of attach onto one of those qualities, if you don't mind?
The word that sprang to mind as I was reflecting on this morning was questions. My favorite question is, what if this is the last time? What if this is the last time? And there's something about that question I find that encompasses a lot. It asks us to open up to the experience. From a psychological flexibility standpoint, I think it asks us to open up to the experience that we're having. It asks us to be present, and it asks us to make a choice around what do we want to do now. So if this is the last time, it almost encompasses all those 3 pillars of the ACT framework there, which I love. And I found it incredibly useful, when things are derailing at home with the kids, or, if I'm feeling nervous before a presentation, which even after hundreds I still do. In fact, it's really, what if this is the last time? What if this is the last podcast I get to give him? Like, what kind of message do I want to leave? What would I like people to take away from this? And so that's the word, and that's my favorite question at the moment.
Thank you. Very practical tool. All right. And our other season 6 question we love to ask our guests is, what disruptive idea do you have that may change the coaching landscape in 2030?
I don't think it's mine, but I do. And technology is the obvious, was again the answer that sprang to mind. I mean, the possibility that AI may provide a coach for people in their pockets, in the not too distant future, that meaningfully helps them in the day-to-day, I think is an astonishing opportunity for all of us, really, to accelerate development as humans. And how that will play out. I mean, I heard yesterday that there's an AI that is recognizing voice tone and word choice to determine how a person is feeling.
Wow.
And I mean, wow, if people could have, one of the challenges with coaching in my mind is that there's just supply and demand are not there, or are not matched, which means that at the moment it's relatively inaccessible for most people. And so if there was a way to democratize that, I'd be incredibly excited. And AI seems to be a potential pathway for that. And of all the use cases for AI, I feel like it could be one of the most beneficial.
Also maybe highlighting a need for us to continuously form and transform ourselves, transform. I love that concept, as coaches, because I mean, basically AI could take over our jobs, right? I mean,
Totally.
You know, I mean, we'd be naive to say that AI can't take over anybody's job. So I'm not just talking about coaches, but it is important that we always continuously reflect on what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my industry and for me as a coach? And how can I work with it rather than thinking that, the glass is half empty, that AI is going to take over the world, which it will.
Yeah.
Going back to your original purpose, to change the world's relationship with suffering. I mean, you've spoke about so many practical tools for us to do that, but I wonder if we can just take it to a step further to sort of round off this episode with what we're just talking about, with whether it be AI or technology. But yeah, I want to land the flight on this episode around your purpose. And how do you help your clients? What are some of the ways that you help your clients with this?
Yeah. Well, to frame it up, I think, the metaphor that I like to use is if I was to smash glass on the floor and say, rightio, let's do some barefoot walking for motivational walking, who'd like to do it? No one says yes. Who wants to go first? But then if I say, well, let's change one condition on that, and that is, bring to mind the person or people most important to you in the world, and they're in distress on the other side of the glass and they need your help. Would you be willing to walk across the glass in bare feet? And almost instantly, everyone starts to nod, whether that's in groups or in one-on-one. And the interesting part for me, there are probably three lessons from that. The first is that, clearly we're terrible at pointless pain. No one likes it. We shouldn't do it. And to your point around burnout, it's a real sort of call to action to look in the mirror. What is burning, and how do we make change there? The second is what's amazing about us as humans, in my opinion, is that if we can get clear on what truly matters to us, what we truly deeply care about, then humans are amazing and extraordinary, in fact, and not just enduring suffering, but embracing it in service of the things that matter most. And then the final piece to recognize in that metaphor is that the glass doesn't change, your bare feet don't change, the implications for your life don't change, none of that changes. But what changes in that moment, with clarity on what truly matters to you, is your relationship to it. And so that is where, the glass being the metaphor for the suffering, obviously, that is where that purpose really came from, is this idea that it's not, the suffering is a part of what we need to learn to work with, because it is a part of life and no one goes through life without it. We all experience it. And so how then do we work with it, rather than trying to fight against it, rather than push back, trying to get rid of it, prevent it happening ever again, breaking through it, overcoming it? There's nothing to fight here. If we deeply accept with a capital A, accept that suffering is actually a part of this experience of ours, then how do we change our relationship to it in order to potentially even harness it as an energy source? I find it really useful. I mean, imposter syndrome is one of my oldest. I always felt like I was the last one selected on any team I made. Still knocks on the door for me whenever I step up to give a presentation. Is anyone going to listen? Can I engage this audience? Will they care? All of that chatter shows up. And so, but I've recognized that if I can actually bring it into the room with me, so rather than seeing it as this enemy to overcome or something to break through, but bring that into the room with me, it energizes me in a way to communicate what truly matters to me to the people in the room, to help them make shifts, which is what I'm trying to do when I think about, a speaking engagement or a coaching engagement, is to use that energy in service of the things that I truly care about. And that's uncomfortable, but that's the real frame, is the relationship change to suffering, is to bring it with us. How can we do that rather than this sort of break it through, fight it, overcome it? There's none of that is actually required, and it's effortful and energetic and costly, in fact, and often leads us away from the things that truly matter to us because we're trying to get rid of it. So that's where I see, it feels as though it's a very precise fulcrum point where there's a lever. If we could change this relationship to suffering, perhaps then, we would all get better at, this never-ending practice of trying to make towards moves. Because information is clearly not the issue, right? Everyone has all the information. We're drowning in it. Information may even be part of the issue. We have so much of it. The paradox of choice, and how do we make these choices? So how do we sit with discomfort, not for discomfort's sake, but to recognize that it is a necessary part of doing what truly matters to us?
Oh, you just summarized so much of what I believe in and teach and coach, and this awareness, naming the feeling and bringing it in and drawing your mind monster and accepting how you feel. And like, there's so many tools, isn't there, out there for people to keep on just exploring this topic. I guess one last question would be, was there a moment in your life where, can you pinpoint when this stuff became clear to you that this is the way of the future?
Yeah, well, the moment in time was 2016. What I call my crucible period was perhaps the seeds of this. I mean, I've always been interested in this stuff. I've always been interested in philosophy and religion and, the human condition since I can remember, really. But what I've called my crucible was 2016, where, and a crucible being a vessel that is exposed to extremely high temperatures to melt and reform metal and purify metal and stuff. And for me, that was, my second daughter had silent reflux, so she was awake every 45 minutes or 90 minutes. I'd had a shoulder operation from throwing a ball for 20 years. And so I'd been trying to sleep upright on the couch for 6 weeks before she arrived. My father-in-law was in hospital with leukemia. My dad had died from a brain tumor, and, heat applied. And really, a big part of that, I think, in hindsight, was this idea that Dad had died at 66. His folks had been 98 and 93, respectively. Really thought that he had 2/3 of the way. He was only 2/3 of the way there. That made me reflect on, what if I am 2/3 of the way there? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And it hurt, to be frank. That period was deeply uncomfortable. And that was when I was introduced to psychological flexibility initially, and its application in sport particularly. And then I thought, this is way too important to leave in sport. And sort of the performance end of the spectrum. This is a toolkit that, it's 40 years of Western science, World Health Organization, clinical trials validating millennia-old traditions of acceptance, mindfulness, and it's not throwing out, the great stuff that we've already been taught around goal setting and values and purpose and those things as well. It's actually recognizing that all these things need to sit together. And I just loved it. So it tied the science that I was interested in to these, philosophical or spiritual traditions, and then the lived experience, I guess, as an athlete. So for me, it was the perfect trifecta of lived experience, and an opportunity to make a contribution that I felt like I, just was intrinsically drawn to, that perhaps I hadn't really found prior to that professionally. Since the Olympics, I was obviously all in on. Starting my own businesses was fascinating, but I really felt I'd been in the wilderness for a while, wondering what I was doing and why I was doing it, even in my own companies at that point. And it led me to resigning from the company I started. It led me to trying to build a tech company on the back of this evidence base, and then ultimately to coaching and speaking about it and sort of banging this drum, because I feel as though it's an important message to share. It feels almost a little simplistic to say that it was just this period. It was very much, that was a catalyst period for what was already there. It was emergent. I really see these things as emergent properties. We gradually make them more and more conscious. It's an ongoing practice. I mean, that purpose statement didn't just hit me overnight. that was 2.5 years of thinking about it. And it started off very different to, helping others be the best version of themselves, to blah, 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 lots of different iterations, so I think a part of the thing I'd love to leave people with is to recognize that it is, going 0 to 1 on a draft the first version is the most important thing you can do, but then to iterate and recognize these ongoing practices, they are not lightning bolt events for the vast majority of people. And so I think that's a really important thing to note, because it can be easy to, say, hear my purpose and feel as though, oh boy, I'm not as clear on that. But I mean, it's been probably potentially some people would think over the top amounts of effort put into that, but I'm like stoked with it, and it drives my thinking and action each day. So it's super useful to me.
Well, everybody, next time you're feeling the discomfort, breathe into it, accept it, and of course, push yourself, not push, let me reframe that, pull yourself towards where you're aligned to go, and just take some time to think about it. The choices we make, from brick walls to trampolines, let's always zoom our thinking in or out based on the questions we're asking ourselves. And I really appreciate your ability to shift our intention in this episode. I hope I did that summary justice. Toby Jenkins, honestly, just a joy and a delight. So shout out to Clifford Morgan, who introduced us.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff.
And also everybody, just thanks for listening. Thanks so much for being on the show, Toby.
Thanks, Em. Thanks for having me.
The Coaching Podcast is sponsored by Transition Coach for Athletes, a global coaching, mentoring, and US college sporting scholarship placement service. The service helps athletes navigate the often challenging world of choosing your best college fit while maximizing sports performance. Visit www.transitioncoachforathletes.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating review on your podcast listening device. And don't forget to tell a fellow coach about the show. The ball is in your court to take action and enjoy your coaching.